And I am with Real Impact and just happy today to bring you another podcast with another interesting guest and someone that I've known for a very long time because I followed him since he was just about a teenager. And he's moved up in the world and into a place of great influence. And I want to make sure that everyone knows about Will Estrada. So Will, welcome to Real Impact's podcast. And I'm just so happy to have this conversation with you about something that is very near and dear to my heart, which is parental rights. Will is the president of parentalrights.org and other things, and he's going to tell us about that in a minute. But this organization is phenomenal. Parents, this organization and Will Estrada and his staff are fighting for your rights as a parent, to raise them according to how you desire, how you want to educate them, how you want to take care of their health and everything that they're exposed to. And Will is leading this fight, and we need other people to know about you other than just us that are in the circle of fighting for parental rights. So Will, welcome. So glad to have you.
Gina, so good to be on. Thank you for all you've done over the years, and thank you for having me.
Well, Will, so you go way back as a young homeschooler. You started with a passion for loving America, loving the family, and living all that God has given us on this earth. And so that has led you down a very interesting path. So why don't you tell the people a little bit about your background, because you have an extensive background. I'm not going to read everything that's in your bio, but tell people some of the highlights and things that you are most proud of.
Well, thank you so much, Gina. You're very kind. I guess I'll start at the beginning. I started off as a homeschool graduate, was homeschooled in New York and Pennsylvania, and then I moved. My first professional job was working at the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. I started off as a legal assistant, helping homeschool families all around the country, then went on, became a lawyer, started leading the lobbying work at the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and I did that for 12 years. Then my career changed, and I actually did something I never thought I would do. I became a bureaucrat. I started working at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in the Office for Civil Rights and the Conscience and Religious Freedom Division. So I was there uh, basically protecting the conscience rights of doctors and nurses around the country, enforcing laws that have been on the books but haven't been enforced for decades. And it was a privilege to be there, just an honor and privilege to be representing doctors and nurses and Americans all around the country. I was heavily involved in the pandemic response. And after several years there, I realized that my passion was not being a bureaucrat, but was working on parental rights issues all around the country. And so I resigned my cushy government job and became the president of parentalrights.org and the Parental Rights Foundation. And so now it's just, we're in the forefront of the work nationwide of protecting children by empowering parents. A little bit about our organization. We were founded by Mike Farris 16 years ago. And the funny thing, Gina, is when I've been involved in parental rights work for many years, and for the longest time, people would say, "Well, Will, what you're doing, your work is a solution in search of a problem." And then the COVID-19 pandemic came, and children were doing Zoom school from home, and parents were sitting at the kitchen table. And all of a sudden, parents were saying, "What is that teacher telling you? What is your curriculum?" And all of a sudden, really, parental rights has come to the forefront in our country. We're seeing parents waking up like never before about the issues that are going on in the schools, about the challenges facing parental rights. And so it's been exciting to be working in Washington, D.C., and all around the country, Gina, defending parental rights.
Well, that's very exciting because now is the time. We have never seen such an attack on the rights of parents to raise their kids according to their own values. And it's exploded not only in California, where we're based, but across the country. So there's pockets here and there. So I'm sure you're traveling across the country and helping people in those states too. You just had a whole week full, right, of travel.
I absolutely have been. In fact, this past week, I started it off on May 1st in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, speaking at a Capitol Day where parents were coming out to the Capitol to talk with their state legislators, then flew home. My wife and I live in Loudoun County, Virginia. We homeschool our two kids, our two boys, ages 10 and 6 here in Loudoun County. So I flew home, spent a day at home working, catching up on everything, then flew out to the West Coast to Portland, Oregon, and spoke to numerous families out there. Another Capital Day talking about parental rights, then an evening talking to legislators and other concerned parents. Spent several days out there in Portland and in Salem, Oregon, then flew back home, another day at home, then flew back to Louisiana. And let me tell you about the bill I'm working on there in Louisiana. Gina, 15 states have laws that say that parental rights are fundamental. This is the highest level of protection for our rights. Our founders in the Declaration of Independence called them inalienable rights, so the highest level of protection. Uh, we're about to have 16 states protecting parental rights as fundamental. The Iowa legislature just passed a bill, SF 496, that protects parental rights as fundamental, gives parents stronger protections in public schools to know what's going on with their own children, to be able to review the curriculum. So as soon as Governor Kim Reynolds signs that in Iowa, it'll be 16 states that protect parental rights. But what I'm so excited about in Louisiana is they are getting ready to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot that says that parental rights are fundamental, God-given, paramount rights, and protecting it not just in state law, but in the state constitution. That would make Louisiana the first state to actually amend their constitution to protect parental rights in the text of the Constitution. So that would give us then, if that happens this fall, 16 states that protect parental rights as fundamental in state code, and then Louisiana would become the 17th, but would protect it in their state constitution. Texas also is working on a parental rights amendment to their state constitution. It's passed the Senate and is pending in the House right now. So that's just a snapshot of some of the work that we're doing with legislation to protect parental rights at the state level. We've got a proposed constitutional amendment to the U.S. Constitution pending in Congress as well. So it's drinking from a fire hose, but I'm thrilled to be in this battle alongside parents all around the country.
Well, that's phenomenal, and I'm just so jealous. California doesn't have anything like that, so it's a real difficult fight for us here in California. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, says about parental rights?
Well, Gina, we're going to talk about some of the things that parents in California can do, because I've been to California a lot. I never give up hope, and parents in California are leading the charge. But yeah, thank you. Want to talk a little bit about the Constitution. So the Constitution does not protect parental rights. It's not in the Constitution. And the reason really is our founders were heavily influenced by the English common law philosophers who said that parental rights are the family is the building block of society, that the family predates government, and so the family is more important than government. And so they saw no need to protect parental rights in the Constitution. About 100 years ago, Gina, we first started to see attacks on parental rights in our country. Back then, there was xenophobia, anti-Catholic bigotry, and states were actually passing laws saying that private schools were banned and parents couldn't use private schools. And in two cases, one was Meyer versus Nebraska in 1923. Another one that's more famous is Pierce versus Society of Sisters in 1925. Actually, Oregon, the KKK had lobbied for Oregon to ban private schools because they wanted to end Catholic education. And the U.S. Supreme Court slapped that down in 1925 in Pierce versus Society of Sisters. There's a famous line in that case where the U.S. Supreme Court said, the child is not the mere creature of the state. And so we've won that battle. Private schools are today well protected, even though it's not in the text of the Constitution. The Supreme Court said that parental rights are fundamental, and there's a line of court cases saying that. Then in the 1970s, as parents began to educate their children at home, there were actually parents facing jail time. Some even actually went to jail while they tried to homeschool their kids. But freedom-loving lawyers, engaged parents, organizations like the Homeschool Legal Defense Association fought in the 70s and 80s and early 90s. Today, homeschooling is legal in all 50 states. And really, that's the heritage of what we're trying to strengthen parental rights in the Constitution. So we're saying it's an implied right. The courts have protected it. The U.S. Supreme Court has protected it. But with all the challenges that we're facing, we need to put it into, enshrine it into the text of the Constitution. So Representative Debbie Lesko, a mom of three, has reintroduced the Parental Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It's been reintroduced as House Joint Resolution 38. We've got co-sponsors. We're trying to get more co-sponsors, so our listeners can go to parentalrights.org to see the text of the Parental Rights Amendment. It's a short, to-the-point amendment. Simply says the liberty of parents to direct the upbringing, education, and care of their children is a fundamental right. Then the section saying that strict scrutiny would be applied by the courts, and then saying that the rights guaranteed by this proposed amendment would not be limited on the basis of a parent's disability, so protecting those with disabilities. And it's, I think, just a great solution to the problem that we have. Obviously, DC's pretty dysfunctional, Gina, as you know, so this is a marathon, not a sprint. But we're thrilled to be working on this amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, and so how can parents help get this passed? What do parents need to do to help parentalrights.org get this through the House and then through the Senate now, right?
Right. So the first thing is call your U.S. representative. You know, parental rights are not a Republican or Democrat issue, and we need to remind our legislators this. When I was in Louisiana, I was thrilled our state constitutional amendment went through unanimously. Democrats, Republicans joined on, so it actually was passed unanimously out of committee. It's pending on the Louisiana House floor. And I think the states really set an example, Gina, for what our federal representatives can do. So I encourage our listeners, our viewers, go to parentalrights.org. You can find all the information there, and then call your U.S. representative. It's really easy. The Capitol switchboard is 202-224-3121, and just say, hi, thank you for representing me in Washington, D.C. I would like you to co-sponsor the Parental Rights Amendment, HJ Res 38. And as they get these phone calls from Republicans, from Democrats, Black, white, Latino, Asian, I think our members of Congress are going to listen and say, you know what? Parental rights are fundamental, and they should be a bipartisan issue, and co-sponsor this. Once we get enough co-sponsors, then we can get a hearing in the House Constitution Subcommittee, then the House Judiciary Committee, and we can really build a groundswell of support to get this through.
Okay, so I remember several years ago, because I've been following parentalrights.org for a very long time, you were looking for people in the different parts of the country to take on a leadership role in that. Are you still doing that?
Well, we absolutely are, Gina, and that's the next step. So the first thing is for our listeners to call their U.S. representative and ask him or her to co-sponsor the Parental Rights Amendment. But second of all, Gina, in order to pass a constitutional amendment, to amend the U.S. Constitution, it's difficult. We know that we need a groundswell, an army of moms and dads. And so we are looking for a parental rights amendment coordinator in every single congressional district, all 435 congressional districts. It doesn't matter if you have a Republican member of Congress, a Democrat member of Congress, an independent there. We are looking for engaged moms, dads, grandparents to sign up and to be our boots on the ground, a grassroots army to get the Parental Rights Amendment through. So if you feel that this is something important to you, if a listener right now is speaking to their heart that they want to protect parental rights for generations to come, then check out the information at parentalrights.org and then reach out to us. Our email address, our phone call is there. Let us know that you want to be that person. It's not a paid position at this time, but it's something that can fit into the schedule. We know that people are busy, whether they're homeschooling their kids or their kids are in public school and they're shuttling them to baseball practice. We know that grandparents are busy. But if this speaks to you, we'd love to have your support as one of our 435 boots on the ground representatives in congressional districts.
And this parent, you don't have to be an attorney, you don't have to be a political activist, you don't have to be a representative, you just have to be a person who's willing to put in time to spreading the word about your work.
That's absolutely the case. Gina. I'm an attorney. I'm licensed in the state of California and in District of Columbia. But no, we don't need attorneys. I sometimes joke that law school warps your brain. So it's actually probably better if we just have engaged, concerned parents who care about their children. At the end of the day, it really is that we're looking for people who love their kids, who love their grandkids, and who want to make sure that for generations to come, that freedom is passed on. I always remember the line from John Quincy Adams, one of our founders and one of our early presidents. And John Quincy Adams said so eloquently, "Duty is ours, the results are God's." And that is one of those quotes that really inspires me because sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Like, it was incredibly exciting to see that victory in Louisiana. Obviously, we still have several more steps before it goes to the voters. But there are states this year, Gina, where I thought we were going to get a state law protecting parental rights through, and it didn't go through this year. But I know, and our volunteers know that John Quincy Adams quote is so important, so true, that all we need to do is show up and the results are in God's hands. And so we're looking for people who are willing to show up and be happy warriors for parental rights.
Yeah, this is a long game. We are not expecting to win every time we put something out, new policy or laws, but we have to continue to be engaged. So I'm curious, for the states that have not passed any type of legislation, what generally is their objection?
So 15 states have this, 16 soon with Iowa. And for a while, these laws were going through on a bipartisan basis. For example, in 2013, the Virginia General Assembly and the Governor McDonnell at the time, signed into law our fundamental parental rights law in the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia. And that was very bipartisan. There were some who voted against it, but it had strong Democrat support. It seems, though, that since the COVID-19 pandemic, parental rights has become a politically charged item. And although there's very strong bipartisan support at the grassroots level, we did a study last year, a survey of 1,002 adults, likely voters, and parental rights pulled off the charts. 85% of Republicans, Black, white, Latino, Asian, supported parental rights. But then, especially in Washington, D.C., but even at some of the elected officials, it's become very partisan. And so usually the opposition is, number one, we don't need it, which is a weird position to take now post the pandemic, where you see all these attacks on parental rights, but that's something we've heard. The second argument we usually get against it is that it will be burdensome on the public schools, and we always push back and say that the best public school teachers know that you want parents to be engaged and involved. And it's very perplexing to me, very perplexing to many public school and private school teachers that parents are almost being treated as the enemy, that they don't need to know anything in the public schools. So that's how we respond to that second argument. And then the third argument is a very recent argument, but it's been that we can't trust parents, and that LGBTQ children need a trusted adult, and that trusted adult should be a public school teacher and not a parent. And it's an argument that flies in the face of all studies, all logic. A parent loves the child more than any government official, even a good teacher. At the end of the day, that mom, that dad, they know their child better than any government official. They love their child more than any government official. And so this talking point has been very, very troubling and very weird, I think, because regardless of what a child is going through, that child needs their parents. And studies across the political spectrum show that.
Exactly, and we've seen that move, especially here in California. We just had the president, he said something, about 3 weeks ago, about your children being everyone's children. Do you remember that? And that's their view. It's like they know better than you, the government knows better than you, and anyone except the parent. And we're finding those types of arguments in California, and it's just so odd because even if you're a progressive, I mean, you have to love your children more than anyone else, so why wouldn't you allow anyone else in the whole state or in the country to have those same parental rights? You want to be able to raise your child according to what you believe. So all that's very interesting because I didn't know a lot of that, and so I'm sure that our audience is learning a lot too, so thank you for that. So let's now talk about some of the things that you are seeing that are happening across the country, and then we'll focus a little bit on California.
Well, you're absolutely right, and it was very troubling when the president said that. He said this now several times that they're all our children. This is not something new. Melissa Harris Perry, an MSNBC contributor, about 6 or 7 years ago, she said the same thing that we have to get right. She said something like, "We have to get rid of this notion that children belong in families, and really realize that children belong to society at large." And then even, as far back as in the early 90s, remember Hillary Clinton wrote the book, It Takes a Village to Raise a Child. When you read the book, we all agree that grandparents are great and family members are great, but it was really, we need the government to raise a child when you read the book. It's a very United Nations, anti-family approach. And it also flies in the face of reason. Gina, our listeners are going to remember this. When the teachers unions shut down the public schools, when teachers went on strike saying we can't go back to the classroom, where were the kids? The kids were at home with their parents who loved them, who weren't afraid of their own children, while the teachers unions shut down the schools. And so it just flies in the face of all reason. Let me tell you a little bit, though, of some of the battles we're seeing. We've recently filed an amicus brief in the First Circuit Court of Appeals in a very important case called Foote versus Ludlow. This is a case the Ludlow School District was socially transitioning a minor girl behind the parents' backs. And get this, it was an 11-year-old girl. And the young lady's teacher was so worried that she broke protocol. She was disciplined by the school. She may have even been fired by the public school. And she was calling the parents and saying, "This isn't good. You need to know what's going on with your daughter. She needs your love and your support." And the parents didn't even know what was going on in the school district. So we filed an amicus brief with the First Circuit. Tragically and shockingly, the parents actually lost at the federal district court level. The district court was actually troubled by the school district's policy, and several times in the opinion dismissing the parents' lawsuit, wrote that it was a perplexing and concerning and troubling policy to not tell parents what was going on with their 11-year-old daughter. But nonetheless, the court was like, but despite our concerns, we're not going to do anything. So this case is now pending before the First Circuit, and ultimately, Gina, I think it's going to make it to the U.S. Supreme Court. But our amicus brief was very simple. We said, regardless of what you think about how children who are struggling with their gender identity should be taken care of, should be cared for, should be protected, we should all agree that you can't lie to the parents of an 11-year-old and do things to that child in the public school behind the parents' backs. And so we submitted that amicus brief to the First Circuit. We went through 100 years of Supreme Court precedent, starting at Meyer versus Nebraska and Pierce versus Society of Sisters and all the cases in between. And, this is a crucial case because if the courts rule against parents of an 11-year-old when there's such good facts here, then what's going to happen to those teenagers who are struggling with issues, and are their parents going to be cut out? So I encourage our listeners to pay attention to this case, Foote versus Ludlow. Unfortunately, cases take a long time to work their way through the courts, but we are hopeful that the court will get this right. That's one of the cases we're involved in. It seems like you just have to turn on the news and find out another tragic case of a school that has not told the parents what's going on, oftentimes with tragic circumstances. These are real children who are struggling with issues, and the people who love them the best don't know what's going on. That happened here in Loudoun County, our home county, where probably many of our viewers are familiar with a male student who sexually assaulted a young woman. The school covered it up and moved this student to another school district where he did the same thing with another young lady. And parents are outraged, and we really need to get our school boards to act. So we're trying to pass laws that protect parental rights, but also I'm traveling around the country talking to parents that they need to know their rights, and school boards that they need to assert themselves again in these issues.
Yeah, we are constantly seeing news stories about minor children as young as 11 years old, and even younger sometimes, secretly being transitioned. And so are you finding that a lot of the violations of our parental rights are taking place in the school?
So most of them are in the schools. There are challenges to parental rights, though, by Child Protective Services, CPS, and we've seen numerous instances where CPS workers come in, they say the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply to us, and we've sued social workers. We have model legislation to try and give families more due process protections, to protect innocent families. You know, the interesting thing, Gina, is more and more people are realizing that CPS investigations are not benign. Sometimes you need them to protect a child from abuse and neglect, but the vast majority of these investigations are not based in any fact. They're quickly closed. But even if they're not quickly closed, and it takes like 30 days of an investigation, that hurts the child. That terrifies a family. So we're trying to pass laws that will reform that. And then we also see a lot of parental rights violations in the area of medical issues, doctors who disrespect parents, and so those kind of three issues: the public schools, CPS reform, and then in the medical community. Those are where we see the vast majority of parental rights violations. So the majority are in the schools, but not all of them. There are other threats to parental rights that we are working on.
Yeah, it is just so frightening. We have a bill that I think we talked about earlier, AB 665, which we're going to be working on more here in California, but it's been dubbed the kidnapping bill because the state ultimately, through a whole lot of process and steps that they have to go through, but they can take your child and basically they don't have to give you a notification. So that's something we'll be fighting in. I'll be calling on you to help us with that, but that's just such a, I'm calling it the parents' worst nightmare. And they're just so aggressive in how they want to push their rules and policies into our family life. And I can't think of anything worse. In all the years that I've been doing this, my biggest fear was always the state coming after our children and being able to take our children. I didn't like when they redefined marriage in state law. I didn't like when they allowed boys into the girls' restroom. I didn't like any of these bills. But when they come after parental rights, oh my gosh, that is just so frightening. And if parents aren't paying attention, you are unsuspecting and susceptible to these types of laws. So parents must pay attention, and I really believe that they should start by following you, parentalrights.org, because you send out emails and you have your court cases also on your website, don't you?
Yes, we do. And actually, our court cases are mainly at parentalrightsfoundation.org. So, kind of our action, our legislative action is at parentalrights.org. Our court cases and resources for parents are at parentalrightsfoundation.org.
So parents need to be up on what's going on with the rights in their state. Do you want to have anything to say about California? You've been following some of the things that have been going on here.
Yeah, so California, I don't think you're going to be able to pass statewide a fundamental parental rights statute soon, at least in the near future, to protect your rights. But here's something that's very important that I want our listeners to know. I don't want people to be afraid. Despite the challenges that we have, and there are many, we still have constitutional protections. We still have the Constitution of the United States to rely upon. And so I want parents to be aware. I want parents to be educated. But there's some things that parents can do, whether you're in California or Washington or Oregon or Minnesota, or if you're in a state like Florida, where maybe parental rights are more respected by the government. Regardless of where you are, here are a few common sense things that I always tell parents, because there are things you can do, and I don't want people to feel hopeless. The first one is know your rights. Obviously, despite the threats to parental rights, the Constitution is still there, and even though it's not in the text of the Constitution, it's still considered an implied right that protects your parental rights. So know your rights, be engaged, know what's going on. If your children are in public school, be proactive in building a relationship with your school board member. Know who that person is. Get their phone number on your speed dial so you can be a constant presence and talking to them. Know your child's teachers as well. Volunteer in the school. Be your local public school's best friend, because sometimes if parents are, in fact, oftentimes if parents are very heavily engaged, the school is going to be more careful of doing things that could threaten parental rights. And then here's something we don't talk about a lot, but be engaged in your child as well. While many of these instances we see are with children who are going through teenage rebellion, if you're loving on your child and being involved and having that strong relationship with your children, it's going to pay dividends both in the short term of protecting your parental rights, but also in the long term with that child, with their eternal soul, with your relationship with them. And so a lot of it, there are a lot of legal issues involved, but a lot of it just comes down to common sense parenting as well, and being an engaged parent. Takes more work. It's something that maybe none of us expected that we'd have to do, but there's never anything wrong with being an engaged parent and being involved in your child's life and education. And that will head off, I think, a lot of these challenges that we see. Again, whether you're in California or whether you're in a more conservative state.
Exactly. We need to be involved even if you're homeschooling. So why don't you tell parents a tiny bit about HSLDA and send them there so they can know more about their homeschooling rights?
Oh, that's great. And thank you so much, Gina, for reminding us about that. So the interesting thing is, when we're talking about parental rights, we've won in the private school space. Remember, I talked about those court cases, talking about parental rights in private school. We've won with homeschooling. It used to be illegal, and today it's legal. The battle now is your rights in the public school. But many, many parents are choosing to homeschool their kids. My wife and I live in Loudoun County, Virginia, which used to have really good schools, and now they've become a battleground. And so we're homeschooling our kids. And if you want to find out more about homeschooling, the best place, as you said, Gina, is to go to hslda.org. Homeschool Legal Defense Association was founded 40 years ago in 1983. They're celebrating their 40th anniversary. And today, homeschooling is not just legal in all 50 states, but it's become mainstream in large part because of the work of HSLDA and homeschooling parents around the country. You know, homeschooling, while it's legal, there are still attempts to crack down on homeschooling. The teachers' unions continue to urge that states pass laws restricting homeschooling. And so HSLDA today continues to monitor thousands of bills in all 50 states to litigate on behalf of homeschoolers. And also, so there's the legal component, but then also they have actual practical helps for homeschooling families. There are dozens of consultants, of coordinators who come alongside of parents who help them, whether it's a struggling learner or high schooler or preschool years. And for members of HSLDA, you do have to join. It's a membership organization. You get all of that help, whether legal or practical, although I would argue legal is practical as well, free of charge for members. So again, hslda.org to find out more information.
And they were so helpful to me. I homeschooled. I was a member of HSLDA way back when. And I'm really going to urge everyone, even if your children are in homeschooling and public school and you're thinking about homeschooling, go take a look at their website, because they're just fantastic in helping parents understand what their rights are. So Will, thank you so much. So much information in just this short amount of time. And you're always so informative and always so interesting. So we really appreciate you. We are going to send people to parentalrights.org, get them signed up, and hopefully get some volunteers for you out in the rest of the country.
There's a lot of work out here, so we'd love to have more people come alongside of us. But Gina, thank you for having me on.
Okay, Will. God bless you. Tell Rachel I said hi, and we'll see you around.
I'll do that. God bless you too, Gina.
All righty. Take care. Bye-bye.